tax. I just happen to live in a high-tax state. Listen to me. You can support your family, support your health, and support our show by going to cpnlive.com and clicking on the icon for Liquid Life Complete Nutrition and ordering it. Our price is delivered to your door any place in the United States, and I'm going to tell you something. Once you start with this, you'll notice the difference, and you'll never want to stop. I didn't. Liquid Life Complete Nutrition at cpnlive.com. Click on the icon and order for yourself. Bob Beauprez served in Congress on the House Ways and Means Committee. He ran for governor of the state of Colorado. He knows how the political process works, and we're going to talk to him about how the political process is working. Bob, how are you?
Stan, it's nice to talk to you again.
Glad to have you on the show, Bob. Let me ask you, let's start with the fact that the president's ratings, his approval versus disapproval is a negative 20. His overall approval rating is 42. You know how this man started. You know the tidal wave, basically, that elected him. Would you have believed in your wildest imagination that 18 months into his administration, he would be disapproved by almost 60% of the people?
No, I would not have. I certainly thought that the glimmer would come off the star a little bit, the bloom off the rose, but I didn't think it would be so dramatic and so fast. And maybe even, maybe an explanation for why that is because just about everywhere you look, Stan, is a broken promise, a pledge he didn't keep, an issue that he was essentially hired by the American people to address that isn't going so well. You know, the debt has skyrocketed, of course, with some credibility. He could say he inherited that problem, but we see no evidence of him having a reasonable plan on how to get it under control again. In fact, by his own admission, his own budget, over the next decade, they're going to add another $10 trillion to our debt. The taxes have gone up. The environment, as we see right now, is getting worse, and it doesn't appear that he's got a plan on how to fix that. And although, he made a great to-do about George Bush and the war on terror and what a mess that was, and how he was going to end the terror, and his aura would basically bring all our enemies to their knees, and we'd be sitting around campfires doing the kumbaya thing. It appears to me that because of his naivete, and I think a clear demonstration of weakness, he's made the world a more dangerous place, too. He's actually emboldened our enemies and actually distanced our friends. I mean, see what's going on in Israel right now. I've got a good friend who's in Israel off and on a regular basis. He's a Jew. He has dual citizenship, Israeli as well as American. And he told me of a recent poll of Israeli citizens that barely 2% of them believe that America is still their friend. Isn't that appalling?
Now, I asked this question of Les Phillip, a man who ran for Congress, a bright man who served our country, who I have gotten to be very, very friendly with and proud to have him as a friend. And I want to ask this question of you, Bob. I believe that the Alinsky playbook that Obama follows says you must pit one group against another. You must pit Muslims against Christians, haves against have-nots, blacks against whites, straights against gays, men against women, old against young, union against non-union, employees against employers, and I'm sure I could name 1,000 more. I see a conquer by dividing strategy that, in my opinion, is working. I have black people in my family. My wife is black. I have union people in my family. I have people in my family that believe that we should, ride bicycles so we won't kill the earth. I have people that actually think that Al Gore is an intelligent life form. Do you see us getting to November, much less beyond, without a contrived, without a prescribed, without a, how do I say this, an instigated strategic conflict, as they instigated the riots in LA by arming people. I see that happening prior to the election so that people will be too afraid to make change. Your thoughts?
It's a frightening scenario that you just laid out, but it's one that I certainly could believe happening, being precipitated by this bunch that's in office now, certainly led by Barack Obama. You mentioned Saul Alinsky, author of Rules for Radicals, of course, the admitted mentor, idol, role model for Barack Obama. And as you described it, that is exactly the playbook, the model for revolution. Barack Obama would prefer to use the word transformation. I think where we failed in listening to this man's rhetoric and studying what he was really all about, we didn't put enough stock in his use of the word transform. He said repeatedly during the campaign, and also in a speech he gave as president-elect right after the election in November before he was sworn in, he didn't want to just improve America. He didn't want to just address the issues in front of us and make this a better place, as almost any politician, any elected official from either party would likely want to say. Of course they would. This man kept using the word transform, which means to me that when he looks out across America, he doesn't like what he sees. He doesn't see a reason to celebrate American exceptionalism, the greatness that is America, acknowledging that we've got challenges in front of us. We always have and we always will. But he saw America as needing to be transformed. This is a man who lamented our Constitution as a, quote, charter of negative liberties. He lamented the fact that our founding fathers put, this is again a quote from him, essential constraints on government so that government could not adequately address redistributed wealth as he thought they should. This is right out of, I know we're not supposed to use, I guess, in political correct society, words like socialist and Marxist and fascist, but it is right out of that playbook, that extreme leftist playbook, where revolution is the means to the end. So when you say, could one happen? Could they incite one? Yeah, I think they could, and in fact, I think that they would like that in order to make a claim that now's a bad time to change those in power. You need to maintain status quo. That means us. That could very easily be their argument, and I could envision that.
Well, that's a scary thought, frankly, but
it's a very frightening thought.
I agree with you. Now, let's talk about the menace, the 800-pound gorilla, in the seat next to you, as that one commercial shows. That is a worldview expressed by the Muslim political side versus the Muslim religious side. But that political side is part and parcel of the religious side, and that worldview says that you do what you need to do to get in, you do what you need to do to get along, you do what you need to do to gain control, and then once you gain control, you do what you've always done, and that is coerce, intimidate, or kill those who oppose you. Have I misstated something?
Yeah, I noticed that you didn't use the word compromise and assimilate to figure out how to fit in, because none of that is part of Sharia law or radical Islam. This administration, of course, won't say the word. Eric Holder, in front of the House Judiciary Committee recently, and I'm sure you've either heard or perhaps seen the video clip of his questioning from Lamar Smith from Texas Lamar Smith, the ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, tried to get Eric Holder to at least admit that our biggest threat in this war on terror was from radical Islam, and Eric Holder wouldn't say the words. Janet Napolitano, of course, won't say the words. The president won't say the words. We are being infiltrated, and I'll give you yet another example of how this administration is either willing to turn a blind eye to it or maybe worse. When Arizona adopted their recent border security illegal immigration statute and essentially said if the federal government's not going to do their job and protect the lives and property of our citizens, we will. Barack Obama said that was misguided. It was irresponsible, likened what was going to be happening as he saw it in Arizona to a father taking his children out for ice cream and being harassed by law enforcement, which is nonsense. Here's what he knows but failed to mention. He knows that our own government has reports of hundreds, maybe even thousands, of radical Islamists who have been sent from more than a dozen different terrorist-supporting states, a dozen different nations that sponsor or harbor terror, like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Sudan, Egypt, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, a dozen different nations that send on a regular basis. This is the strategy that's playing out in front of our eyes. We know it. Governments documented it. They're sending them into South America into a Spanish language and cultural immersion program. They migrate through Central America into Mexico. They assimilate with Mexican nationals. They slip across our border, and guess what? They disappear. Why do you think they're here? Just trying to get a job that nobody else wants, as they like to say? I don't think so. 23 Somalis with Al-Qaeda connections were released from Mexican jails in January. Everybody understands that they were headed straight to the U.S. border, our southern border. They disappeared, and we have no idea where they're at. One of the most wanted terrorists in the world, a guy named Adan Sukrajima. He is a Saudi Arabia bomb expert and pilot. Does that sound familiar? Mm-hmm. We know he crossed our southern border. We know that he was spotted in Atlanta months ago, and we can't find him. That's what the president knows is happening because of his failure and the failure of previous administrations and previous Congresses. But he knows that to be the case, and again likens border security, steps toward border security, to a dad taking his kids out for ice cream. Give me a break. He is derelict on his duty, his sworn oath to protect and defend us against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I rue the day when those chickens will come home to roost, because they will.
Now, according to an Egyptian official, he has a videotape showing the president with his hand on the Quran saying that he is, in fact, a Muslim. Whether or not he is a Muslim isn't so much a question for me. He is acting against the interest of America and in the interest of the Muslim movement around the world. That cannot be argued.
Well, his father was a Muslim. He was raised around Muslims. I don't know what faith he says he really is. He says he's a Christian, of course. That in and of itself is apostasy and punishable by death to some traditional Muslim believers. This is a conflicted man. I don't know what is inside of him, and my wife was actually the first one to notice it, Stan. You look in his eyes, and I have met him. I met him when he was a freshman senator. Wasn't there very long. Met him briefly. But you look in his eyes, they're not just cold. You almost wonder if there's a soul back there. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say that just to infuriate. I don't have my tinfoil hat on right now. I'm just telling you that when you meet this man, he operates differently than virtually anybody else I ever saw, ever met, and he surrounded himself with a group of fairly interesting individuals as well. I know Rahm Emanuel quite well. We were classmates. We were on the committee together. We interacted a lot together. Barack Obama is a brass-knuckled, tough guy. Eric Holder, I think, is the weakest of the weak links in his administration, and unfortunately, he happens to be our Attorney General. Eric Holder spends way too much time recruiting and hiring lawyers who have voluntarily defended terrorists. Imagine, and maybe this is the case with you, Stan, I don't know. Imagine being a taxpayer of the United States who lost a loved one on 9/11. Your tax dollars are now paying the salary of people who voluntarily defended terrorists sworn to do exactly that. Some of them were part of the 9/11 conspiracy. And now they are the defenders of those people.
Allegedly.
Are employed at the Department of Justice.
Allegedly. All right, let me ask you this question. You were in Congress. Rahm Emanuel is allegedly Jewish. He's no more Jewish than my shoe. But there are a group of Jews in this country, and I, as a Jewish person, I don't say this in a prejudicial way, who believe in God. They're called Orthodox Jews or Messianic Jews. And there are a group of Jews in this country who think they're God. Rahm Emanuel is one of those. These are people that think that if they want it to happen, it's okay. If they want it to be, it should be. If they want it to be allowed, they'll simply allow it, and they, in your face, lie, cheat, and steal. Barack Obama got millions and millions and millions of dollars from foreign entities, foreign governments. It was never checked. No one said boo. No one was allowed to. And his own system said they checked after the fact, not before they took the money. If any Republican had done that, they'd be in jail.
Well, this man has no use for the rules. This man again, I'll cite again. He laments our Constitution. He sees it as a failed document. He does not respect the rule of law, in spite of being supposedly an educated lawyer. This whole recent case with Joe Sestak and Andrew Romanoff in Colorado, clearly, I mean, admittedly, being offered bribes to get out of primaries, that's a felony. These guys don't care about the rule of law, whether it's election law, campaign finance law, any law. The only law they respect is one that they make up on the fly for the moment. And as you said, they see them as akin to the Almighty. They are the power. Their whole game plan is clearly about seizing more power. Obamacare was never about health care. I think most of us are seeing the skin come off of that onion, and our eyes are starting to water even worse, because it was not about health care. It was about a government takeover of 16% of our economy, seizing power from the individuals. These guys, I don't think ever in America have we used the phrase I'm about to use to describe them, ever in America about our own government, but these guys are central planners right out of George Orwell, right out of Animal Farm, right out of socialism, fascism, Marxism. This is the way they think. It is a constant. Their whole agenda is a consolidation of power around them. Public opinion is against them on virtually every single issue, and yet they keep ramming their agenda down our throat, making the Democrats in Congress walk the plank, take the votes, pass the bills, do what they say, and again, you can't look at this even semi-objectively and not recognize it for what it is.
I want to mention a name. The name is Tim Adams. He was the senior elections clerk for the city and county of Honolulu in the 2008 campaign, and he says unequivocally there is no birth certificate there for Barack Obama. Everyone knows it. No one wants to admit it. No one wants to, create uneasiness in America. But this man is not an American. He was not born in America, and it's an absolute fraud. His Social Security numbers for someone born in Connecticut. The sheets have been pulled back, and they're saying, so what? We're just going to tell you drop dead, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, on the birth certificate, I don't know. I've heard both sides of it. I find it absolutely astounding that if he has one, if this is all just a myth, why in the world not put it to bed? There's a reason why they haven't at least settled that controversy. I'll address it another way. If this guy is an American citizen, he's a different kind of an American than virtually any that I know. My dad and mother taught me a long time ago, and I know I wasn't alone in this. My parents taught me that you're known by the company you keep. We should have figured out a whole lot, well, some of us did. When this guy's friends are Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn, Reverend Jeremiah Wright, his mentor again is Saul Alinsky, what do you think you're going to get? In the little while he was in the United States Senate, he established the most liberal voting record of the entire Senate, more liberal than the self-professed socialist Bernie Sanders, more liberal than Barbara Boxer, more liberal than Ted Kennedy, more liberal than Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, all of them. And that takes some doing to be the most liberal, and we're surprised that this guy behaves as a different kind of an American. We shouldn't be. He is, you can't, just get in that Oval Office, you don't change your stripes. This guy comes from a different place, and he acts and thinks differently than virtually any American, anybody that I really served with in Congress, and I served with some guys that were over there on the edge, Dennis Kucinich and a few of them. But this guy comes from a whole different place and has a dramatically different agenda.
Let me ask you about this bill that's being pushed by Lieberman, who everyone thinks is a good guy, but I don't agree with this bill at all, that would give Barack Obama, in case of a national emergency, which would be determined by him, the ability to turn off the internet, to turn off Twitter, to turn off Facebook, to turn off programs like this, to turn off emails, to turn off the ability of America to communicate. Doesn't that scare the bejeebers out of you? Absolutely.
The only way we knew a little bit of what was going on inside Iran months ago, when you had the young people protesting and getting clubbed and beaten and in some cases murdered, was why? Because of cell phones, because of Twitter, because of Facebook, because of social networking. That is part of our freedom as individuals, as America, as Americans. The only freedom these guys believe in is the freedom for the central planners to do as they will, to exercise all of their control to limit our individual freedom. The reason that this guy doesn't like the essential constraints, as he said, that the Founding Fathers placed on government, is because the Founding Fathers understood government was the threat to individual liberty. He wants to threaten individual liberty. He actually believes he does know better than any of us, or any of us can possibly decide for our own benefit, for our own gain, for our own family, in our own workplace. He thinks he needs to control everything because he believes somehow he is smarter, more enlightened. This is a different agenda. It's not just a different administration. It's not a little swing of the pendulum one direction or the other. This is a dramatic shift such as America has never witnessed. And I hope that enough people are starting to take the scales off their eyes, put this hope and change thing aside, and decide that it's time to get their country back.
Bob, we have how do I say this? We have a division in this country unlike any division we've had, probably going back to the Civil War. And maybe even that wasn't as great, even though we did have a terrible war. We have people in this country that believe that industry is bad, that driving a car is bad, that eating meat is bad, that we are abusing anyone and everyone, and we're bad because we're not as poor as they are. And these are not people who have those feelings. These are people that are willing to fight, to destroy, to murder. you know, the far left in this country is way left of Barack Obama. You wouldn't think that's possible, but they are. We have people in the homosexual movement that believe that they should have carte blanche to have sex with every kid in America, and that any parent that would object should be punished. Now, you may think I'm going too far, but I don't think I'm going nearly as far as they would like to go.
Well, I grew up, I guess came into adulthood in the 60s, and I thought that was a pretty messed up time. You know, that generation tried very hard to destroy every semblance of organization, of authority, the family, our churches, private sector, certainly government, and thankfully weren't successful in doing it. The country survived after all. But some of those radicals didn't completely grow up, and we've got some of those hanging around now. They do not like, as you said, the private sector, what we call the free market economy. They don't like traditional family. They certainly don't like churches. And by the way, you study a little bit about the leftists. Every tyrant, whether it was Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, pick one, or Saul Alinsky, the first thing you go after is the churches. You want to destroy the belief in faith in anything other than the powers that be, the almighty tyrant. That's what's going on now. I've written about, given speeches about what I call the war on prosperity. I don't lament the fact that, especially in the last about 150 years, America has been the most industrious, the most prosperous, the greatest place on earth to create wealth. Our wealth that we created also created the greatest amount of invention, the greatest expansion of intelligence. It created opportunity for people all over the world that would not have been able to share in the beneficence of America if it weren't for the enormous amount of wealth we created. And we also liberated, we liberated Europe twice, didn't we, inside of 1 century. We liberated tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of people around the planet because we had this robust economy that could support the expansion of freedom, and yes, a military, a very powerful military, but one that has never, not one single moment in time, been used for conquest. I don't lament that. I don't apologize for it. I don't back up from it. I celebrate it. This president went to the United Nations last September and declared that no nation is superior to any other. Not morally, not economically, not spiritually, no way should any nation be more superior. That is a one world view, and as Abraham Lincoln told us, you don't make the weak stronger by weakening the strong man or the strong nation. That's his plan. One guy who I have an enormous amount of respect for, and I guess he is a Jew, Charles Krauthammer. Charles wrote a great piece, an opinion piece, about decline being a choice. And in that article, he makes the argument that this president is one of those who clearly believes that America is on a slide, on a declining path, and he not only accepts that theory, he wants to manage that decline, and if he can, accentuate that decline, because again, he happens to be one who in his heart of hearts believes that no nation should be or is as superior as the United States of America has clearly become in the world. I've seen a lot of people not blessed to be an American citizen around the world that hold up America as the ideal, the imagination they want to strive for. That's what keeps them going, is that one day maybe their grandchildren could experience that kind of a blessing. Barack Obama wants to do away with that expectation.
Barack Obama wants to become the leader of the world. Barack Obama wants to position himself as the savior of the world who brought down America so that everyone could be equal but awful, and that he, of course, has to be more than equal and certainly not awful as he parties and just indulges himself with no limits whatsoever. All right, we're going to close out here, but I want to ask your thoughts about the tyrants around the world who now no one's focusing on, whether it's Ahmadinejad or it's, what's his name, Chavez, Hugo Chavez, or it's the idiot in North Korea, or the guy in Bolivia. The fact is, we now have, the Mugabe, we have a president and administration that has taken all the heat off of the tyrants.
And he is, all of these people, all of those and more, the Osama bin Laden, whatever cave he's hiding in, Hamas, Hezbollah, all of them believe, as I'm afraid this president does, that America is in decline, that we no longer have the moral clarity to call evil by its name, to fight against evil, to stand up for right and for freedom. They believe that sooner or later America, out of weakness, will cave. If they just have forbearance and they can outlast us. This president gives them every reason to believe that that assumption is correct. Before he ever met Vladimir Putin, he cancels the missile defense program for two of our great allies, Poland and Czechoslovakia, to defend them, to give them at least some sort of a shield against an increasingly aggressive Russia. He freely invites Ahmadinejad to sit down. Let's talk. Let's see if we can't work things out. But when Benjamin Netanyahu comes to Washington, he has him sit and wait alone while Barack Obama goes and has a private meal. Embarrasses the leader of one of our great allies, the only democracy and our only really strong ally in the whole Middle East. He has made the world a far more dangerous place. Why in the world would you telegraph to your enemies what you would not do, even if you were attacked by chemical, biological, or even a nuclear weapon?
Because
Why would you tell them the limits?
Because he's a novice. Because he's inexperienced. Because he's never run a hot dog stand. Because he's, and you'll pardon the crudeness here, but he reminds me of a cockroach doing the backstroke down the Ohio River in a state of sexual arousal while yelling, "Raise the drawbridge." His view of him and reality haven't ever met, much less are they related. We're out of time, Bob. A very interesting discussion. Appreciate your love for country. Hope that you and I can come together next year, say that there was a great election, a great awakening, a great turn, and we still have a country. That's yet to be seen. Good night, my friend. Thank you for being part of the show.
Good night. Thanks, Dan. Let's do it again.
And we will. And good night, America. This is Talk to Sullivan.